Mark's book was the first real anti-self-help book. Before this book, self-help and personal development was like, try your hardest, be motivated, be happy. And one of the smartest things Mark did was he saw where everyone was zigging and he zagged. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F has sold over 10 million copies and has been an international bestseller for years. Mark Manson absolutely killed it with this book. And in this video, I'm going to break down a list of reasons that I think this book has done exceptionally well and how you can apply them to your book moving forward. So I want to start with an embarrassing story. Many years ago, I reached out to Mark before he'd written this book, and I complimented him on an article that I thought was fantastic. I said, hey man, just really appreciated this. You're a great writer. Good for you. And he wrote back a nice email and effectively asked, hey, if you have any tips for publishing, I'd love to hear them. I wrote back a very arrogant and condescending email that effectively was like, okay, you're just an information products blogger and you want to reach a wide audience. Okay, sure, guy. You shouldn't go the traditional publishing route. Nobody likes their publishers, blah, blah, blah. I was an arrogant guy in his 20s. So I've never been more wrong in my advice. And so part of doing this video is to rectify my wrongs because again, Mark has just done phenomenally well. And I'm so glad he did not listen to me. The very first thing that contributed so much to this book's success is the title. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The title is the most important marketing decision that you can make. And I believe he wrote an article with the same title that went viral. And what happened, as I can recall, is that a publisher reached out to him and said, hey, do you want to turn this article into a book? And man, that title is just so iconic in so many ways because it was the first title in my memory that dropped the F-bomb. So right there, that set it apart as very unique, and I don't say this in an insulting way, but very millennial. All of a sudden, it felt aligned with the climate that so many of us have been living in, which is social media. It's way edgier than traditional media, and books hadn't really caught up to that reality in our culture. You know, books tend to be very kind of stiff and safe in terms of their titles, and so to drop the F-bomb in a title was very controversial and provocative at the time. Now there's a bunch of books that try and drop it almost to a point where I get annoyed when I see it because it feels derivative. But that title made such a splash and was so unique at the time. What that effectively did was create a new category of book, one that uses swear words on the cover as a mass market product. That had not been done. And so it became the category leader of that unique category. And so what happened as a result of that was the book cover became a meme, and you could go on social media and see people posting pictures of them reading the book because they identified or wanted to identify as somebody who didn't give an F. What others thought, right? What better place to go than social media to brag about how you don't care what people think, right? But it was really fascinating to watch. Suddenly, this book became almost like, you know that sign in Austin that a lot of people go under, I love you so much, it's become iconic? Kind of one of the first books I've seen do that on social media where people used it as kind of a badge of honor. Look at me posing next to this artifact, right? So the title and the cover really did so much of the heavy lifting of the marketing of this book, and A+, one of the best titles I've ever come across. Now, the book continues to sell millions of copies year after year after year because it's substantive, it's really valuable, it's really good. And the book opens with a story of an anti-hero, Charles Bukowski. It was a very counterintuitive story about what it actually means to be successful. Charles Bukowski basically embraced the fact that he was a loser. He didn't try to be anything but who he was, which was like an alcoholic, a degenerate, a womanizer, all this stuff. And he just leaned into it. And his advice for success was basically don't try. Don't try to do more than you are. And it dovetails really nicely into the book itself, which the message is, hey, I'm not telling you not to care about anything. I'm telling you there's only a few things in your life that you really should care about. And the rest you should discard and say, I'm not going to care about that. And interestingly enough, the book is kind of a millennial modern version of Buddhism in that light. It really talks about letting go of attachments ultimately so that you can be more fulfilled, more at peace, and ultimately happier. So the book really is valuable, is my point. And it was unique. It told really good stories from an angle that you hadn't ever heard of. And this gets back to creating a category. Not only was Mark's book the first in the category of dropping an F-bomb, Mark's book was the first real anti-self-help book. And so it became this entirely new category. If you think about where self-help and personal development was as a category before this book, it was very much like, try your best, try your hardest, be motivated, be happy, fake it till you make it, positive thinking, etc., etc. And one of the smartest things Mark did was he saw where everyone was zigging and he zagged. He went the exact opposite way. And so this is something I've seen Ryan Holiday do really well as well, is he started writing about Stoicism when no one else was talking about the importance of philosophy and kind of living these sober realities rather than getting swept away with your emotions. It was fundamentally different. So one of the easiest hacks that you can do is say, okay, everybody in the category that I'm writing for in personal development or business, entrepreneurship, whatever, what are they all doing? What are the patterns? And can I go in the opposite direction to make myself contrarian, to make myself distinctly unique from everything else, so that I can stand out in this crowded market and potentially create my own? The next thing is this book is accessible to the masses. I mean, everybody swears, pretty much. Every adult swears. And so this book was appealing to people who didn't even read books. And this is one of those unique traits about a book that'll sell 1 million copies, is you have to reach people that don't even read. They haven't read any books since college or high school effectively, and they want to go and buy this book because either everybody's talking about it, they're like, I'll deal with it because it looks entertaining more than educational. This is a very challenging thing to pull off, but if you can pull it off, you can expect to see a much broader audience. A lot of authors aspire to sell 1 million books, but the reality is, there aren't even really 1 million readers in the United States, people who buy books and read books in their entirety. So it's very difficult to do this. The only way that you can do it is by reaching the 299 million non-readers and getting them to buy and read the book. The next on the list, will people talk about your book? I've covered this, but it is worth reiterating because it is that important. Are readers willing to brag about your book to strangers on social media? It is very difficult to accomplish this as an author, but if taking a picture of the book elevates their status, makes them look awesome, makes them look funny, etc., it makes marketing your book so much easier because then your target readers become your salespeople effectively. So do not ever hesitate to invest in a great cover design. Do not hesitate to spend money on split testing your titles using tools like PickFu or Google ads or Facebook ads. It's absolutely worth the investment to figure out what is the best title, what is the best cover, is this something people will proudly talk about and share with others. Next, the book is both timely and timeless. The book has a Buddhist angle, which is timeless. It is very well known and lots of people want to tap into that. But the timeliness of this book is really what made it shine and take off, because people were at the peak of being frustrated with social media, how exhausting it is to constantly be dragged in, pulled into these various things and suddenly being whipped about emotionally, caring about things that you wouldn't otherwise care about, right? I make the joke to my wife that when she gets worried about something, would you be worried about this at all if you hadn't looked at a screen beforehand? And the answer is very often no, because life is generally pretty smooth and steady, but if you're looking at social media, you're constantly getting anxious or freaked out. Mark came out with this book kind of around the peak timing of that. At that time, I believe people were becoming aware of the addictiveness of Facebook. He hit a cultural zeitgeist that can be very difficult to time, but if you hit it, disproportionate rewards on the other end. I want to call out the notion of a successful launch. As I recall, this book was successfully launched by most measures, but what is really important to point out here, respectfully to Mark, it wasn't like a world-changing launch. It wasn't an elite-level, best-in-class launch. It was a good launch. And I would imagine he sold a few thousand copies. He's got plenty of friends who are influencers, bloggers, etc., and he's got his own list. So I'd imagine he sold a few or several thousand copies, but a far cry from 10 million. And this is something that's just really important to call out. Yes, go for a good launch. Yes, do your best. But understand that the life cycle of your book is very long, and you're effectively just planting a seed into the ground that's going to turn into a tree that will bear fruit for you for many years to come and ideally spread and pollinate throughout culture. Don't worry so much if your launch is it really is a matter of, have you written a phenomenal book that people are willing to talk about, that's super valuable and can stand the test of time? That's where you really need to disproportionately spend your energy. Don't worry so much about the launch, worry about writing a phenomenal book. And finally, Mark's book gets ongoing massive distribution. He went with a traditional publisher despite my advice, and I'm so glad he did, because he gets tons and tons of distribution all around the world. I'd imagine his book, I don't know the numbers, but I'd imagine it's been translated into at least 30 languages. And it is very difficult to do that on your own if you're self-publishing. So if you have a real shot at writing something that could reach millions of people, you have the data points to show, hey, this could be a really big thing, it behooves you to aim to go the traditional route so you can get that physical distribution, because a lot of people buy books in stores still. I know most buy on Amazon, online purchases, etc., but there is a lot to be said about having your book out in the real world and meeting buyers there. The other interesting thing that Mark has started to do in getting ongoing massive distribution, he's really focused on content and making these longer YouTube videos. I thought one of the smartest things he did was he made a video reviewing his own book. Or it wasn't a review, it was a summary. And people are looking for summaries of books. Who better to summarize it than the author himself? And the other interesting thing that he did was he made a movie. I don't know the story behind it, if he produced it himself or if he worked with a studio or whatever, but he made a movie. And I actually was on a flight recently and I looked over in the aisle next to me, a guy was watching that movie. So good for him in continuing to bet on himself, bet on his message, and take it to new levels in different forms of media to keep getting the message out there. And that's ultimately where I'll wrap up with this is, look, just because you put the book out there does not mean people will read the message, will understand the message, will see the message. There's just so much media out there that the masses are consuming, and so meet them where they are, be it podcast, TikTok, in-flight movie screen, wherever. Do your best to keep getting your message out there, because after you publish, the battle is not done. You've only just begun. So thanks so much for watching. If you've read Mark's book and feel that I missed anything, let me know in the comments below.